Have you ever felt time just stop? Like the world holds its breath, and you're trapped in a moment you know you shouldn't be in, but some part of you doesn't want to leave. Like the air gets so heavy it presses against your chest, and every sound, every movement feels like it's pulling you towards something dangerous. That's what happened to me that night in my best friend's kitchen. I was 22, crashing at Jake's place after a long, aimless day of driving around our small town, trying to outrun the feeling that I was going nowhere. It was late, 2 a.m., maybe closer to 3, and sleep was a stranger. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, like it's watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. I crept downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, the chill creeping up my legs like a warning. I just wanted a glass of water, something to ground me, to quiet the restlessness that had been gnawing at me for weeks. The kitchen was dark, swallowed in shadows, with only a thin sliver of moonlight slipping through the blinds, painting silver streaks across the counter like veins of light. I thought I was alone. I thought the house was asleep, just like Jake, just like the world outside. But then I saw her, Claire, Jake's mom, standing by the counter, her silhouette soft and still in a gray robe that clung to her like a second skin. Her hair was loose, catching the moonlight in a way that made it look alive, like it was whispering secrets. Her eyes, though, they were restless, searching, like they'd been waiting for someone to meet them in the dark. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be asleep, tucked away in her room, part of the normal order of things. But she turned, saw me, and didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a small, fragile smile, the kind that hides 1,000 unspoken words, the kind that makes you feel like you've stumbled into something you're not meant to see. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper, like she was afraid to disturb the quiet, like she was protecting something fragile. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight, my heart picking up speed for reasons I couldn't name. My fingers gripped the edge of the counter, the cold metal grounding me, but not enough. Then she said it, so softly I almost missed it. "Could you keep me company?" 5 words. 5 words that felt like a match struck in a room soaked in gasoline, ready to ignite everything I thought I knew. I should have laughed it off, made some dumb joke, turned around, and gone back upstairs, pretending it was nothing. But I didn't. I stayed. And that's when I knew I was in trouble. Have you ever been in a moment like that? Where you know you should walk away, but your feet are glued to the floor? Where someone's words hit you somewhere deep, somewhere you didn't even know existed? Where the world feels like it's tilting, and you're not sure if you want to fall? I'm not proud of what happened next, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Because this isn't just a story, it's a warning. About how one night, one conversation, can unravel everything you thought you were, leaving you staring at a version of yourself you don't recognize. So, let me take you back to that kitchen, to the moment I realized I was standing on the edge of something I might never come back from. It was the kind of moment that makes you question who you are, what you're capable of, and whether you're as good as you've convinced yourself you are. Jake and I had been friends since we were kids, growing up in the same sleepy town, chasing the same reckless dreams of escaping to a life that felt bigger, brighter, better. His house was my second home, a place where I knew every creaky floorboard, every chipped mug in the cupboard, every faded photo stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. I could walk through it blindfolded and not miss a step. Claire, his mom, was always there, woven into the fabric of the place like the hum of the air conditioner or the smell of coffee in the morning. She'd make us sandwiches after school, ask about our day, laugh at our terrible jokes with a warmth that felt effortless. She was Jake's mom. You know how it is. You don't see your friends' parents, not really. They're just there, part of the scenery, like the worn couch or the scuffed dining table. But looking back, I realized I'd been noticing things about Claire for a while, even if I didn't let myself admit it. The way her laugh had a faint sadness when she thought no one was listening, like it was a song she'd forgotten the words to. The way she'd linger in the doorway sometimes, watching us play video games or argue over pizza toppings, her eyes distant, like she was chasing a memory she couldn't quite catch. She was in her early 40s, I think, but she didn't carry herself like it. She was soft, warm, with this quiet grace that made her seem untouched by time, like life hadn't worn her down as much as it should have. Her hair, dark and slightly wavy, always seemed to fall just right, framing her face in a way that made you look twice. Her eyes were what got me, though, deep hazel, with a kind of depth that made you feel like she saw more than you wanted her to. Jake's dad was always gone, business trips, he called them, though I never knew what he did, and I never asked. Nobody did. It was just the way things were, an unspoken rule we all followed. That summer, I was at Jake's place more than usual. I just graduated college, my degree in history feeling like a useless piece of paper, no job lined up, no plan to speak of. I was stuck in that strange in-between, not a kid anymore but not quite an adult, floating in a sea of uncertainty. Jake was the same, both of us drifting, spending our days playing video games, driving aimlessly, talking about futures we couldn't picture. His house felt like a refuge, a place to hit pause on the pressure of figuring out what came next. Claire was always there, too welcoming maybe. She'd cook these big dinners, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, and insist I stay, telling me I was too skinny, that I needed to eat more. I'd laugh, say thanks, pile my plate high, but there was this undercurrent. Her kindness felt personal, like it wasn't just for Jake or the house but for me. Like she saw something in me that nobody else did. I didn't dwell on it, not consciously. I mean, she was Jake's mom. You don't go there. You don't even let yourself think about going there. It's a line you don't cross, a rule written in stone. But that night, in the kitchen, everything changed. I was standing there, glass in hand, the tap dripping like a metronome, when she spoke. Her voice wasn't just soft, it was heavy, like it carried years of unspoken weight, years of things she'd never said out loud. "Could you keep me company?" she said, and it wasn't a question. It was an invitation, a door cracked open, daring me to step through. I don't know why I didn't leave. Maybe it was the way her eyes held mine, like she was seeing me for the first time, not Jake's friend, not some lost kid, but me, all of me, the parts one didn't show anyone. Maybe it was the silence of the house, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only two people awake in the universe, like the world outside doesn't exist. I mumbled something about not being able to sleep either, my voice catching in my throat, and she nodded, like she'd known it all along. She poured herself a glass of wine, her fingers brushing the bottle like it was an old friend, someone she could trust. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Feeling like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what." I didn't know what to say. My heart was thumping, loud and unsteady, and I didn't know why. Her words felt like they were meant for me, like she was reaching into my head and pulling out thoughts I'd buried deep. She motioned to the table, and I sat, the chair scraping too loud in the silence, the sound echoing like a warning I didn't heed. That's when I noticed her robe slipping, just enough to show the curve of her shoulder, pale and smooth in the moonlight. I looked away, fast, my face hot, my pulse racing. She didn't fix it. She just watched me, her eyes steady, waiting to see what I'd do next. I felt like I was being tested, and I wasn't sure if I was passing or failing. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. We sat there, the kitchen clock ticking like a countdown to something I couldn't name, each tick louder than the last, like it was marking the seconds I was choosing to stay. Claire sipped her wine, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass, slow and deliberate, like she was drawing out the moment, stretching it thin until it might snap. I held my water glass like a shield, my knuckles white, my hands unsteady. She started talking, small things at first, safe things, like the weather, how it had been too hot to sit outside, or the neighbor's dog that kept barking at shadows. She mentioned Jake, how he was settling into his new job, how proud she was but also how she worried he was working too hard. Her voice was warm, familiar, but every word felt heavy, like she was circling something she wasn't ready to say, like she was building a bridge to somewhere dangerous. I kept waiting for her to laugh, to break the tension, to say something that would make this normal again, something that would send me back upstairs with nothing but a funny story to tell Jake in the morning. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her robe shifting just enough to make my pulse jump, to make me notice the soft curve of her neck, the way the moonlight caught her skin. "Do you ever feel stuck?" she asked, her voice cracking on the last word, like it cost her something to say it. I saw it then, a flicker of something raw, something she'd kept hidden, like a wound she'd learned to live with. I nodded because yeah, I did. I was 22, lost, no direction, no idea who I was supposed to be or how to get there. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough, barely audible. "Like you're waiting for something to happen, but it never does." Her eyes lit up, just for a second, like I'd unlocked something, like I'd spoken a truth she'd been carrying alone. "Exactly," she whispered, her voice so soft it felt like a secret. "Exactly." She leaned back, her robe catching the moonlight again, and I tried to focus on anything else, the table, the grain of the wood, the drip of the tap, but her voice pulled me in like a tide, slow and relentless. She started talking about her life, not everything, just pieces, like she was handing me fragments of a puzzle she didn't expect me to solve. She'd wanted to be an artist once, she said, back before she met Jake's dad. She used to stay up all night painting, lost in colors and shapes, feeling like the world was hers to shape. She talked about the smell of oil paint, the way it clung to her fingers, the way a blank canvas felt like a promise. She hadn't touched a brush in years, not since Jake was born, not since life closed in around her. "Life gets in the way," she said, her voice flat, but her eyes said more. They said she was lonely. They said she was trapped. They said she was reaching for something, and I was the only one there to catch it. I wanted to say something, anything, to ease the ache in her voice, but my mouth was dry, my thoughts a tangled mess. The air was thick now, hard to breathe, like the room was holding us too close. She asked about me, my plans, my dreams, the girls I'd dated. Her questions were soft, gentle, but they cut deep, like she was peeling back layers I didn't know I had. I told her things I'd never told Jake, things I'd barely admitted to myself. How I felt like I was failing at everything, like my degree was a joke, like I was running out of time to figure out who I was. How I was scared I'd never be enough, not for my parents, not for myself, not for anyone. She listened, her eyes locked on mine, and it felt dangerous. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. Because of the way she leaned closer, her hand brushing mine when she reached for her glass, her fingers grazing my knuckles for a fraction of a second. An accident, I told myself. Just an accident. But my skin burned where she touched me, a heat that lingered like a brand, and I didn't pull away. She noticed. I know she did. Her eyes flickered and she said, "You're different, you know. From Jake. From everyone." Her voice was so soft, so careful, it hit me like a punch to the chest. I laughed, nervous, trying to break whatever spell was wrapping around us, trying to make this normal again. "I'm just me," I said, but it sounded weak, like I didn't believe it, like I was begging her to tell me who I was. She smiled, that small, knowing smile, and said, "That's enough." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a late-night talk. This wasn't just Jake's mom being nice. This was something else, something we weren't supposed to feel, something that could ruin everything. I thought about Jake, asleep upstairs, oblivious. I thought about his dad, off on another trip, leaving her alone in this house. I thought about how wrong this was, how I needed to leave, needed to get out before I did something I couldn't undo. But her eyes were on me, steady and unyielding, and they wouldn't let me go. The silence stretched, heavy, unbearable, like a weight pressing down on us both. She stood up, walked to the sink, and started rinsing her glass, the water hissing softly against the steel. It was such a normal thing to do, so ordinary, but the way she moved, slow, deliberate, like she knew I was watching, made it anything but normal. Her robe swayed slightly, catching the light, and I tried not to notice, tried to focus on the sound of the water, the ticking clock, anything but her. "You don't have to go," she said, not turning around, her voice soft but firm, like she was offering me a choice I wasn't ready to make. "It's nice, having someone to talk to." My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it, thought it would betray me. I opened my mouth to say goodnight, to end this before it went too far, but what came out was, "I can stay a little longer." And that's when I crossed the line. I knew it even then. I was stepping into something I couldn't take back, something that would change me, whether I wanted it to or not. The kitchen felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in, the air thick with something I couldn't name, something that made every breath feel like a choice. Claire turned from the sink, drying her hands on a towel, the motion slow and careful, like she was measuring every second. She didn't sit back down, didn't leave, just leaned against the counter, her eyes soft but sharp, like she could see every thought I was trying to hide, every doubt, every flicker of one I was fighting to bury. I kept telling myself this was nothing, just two people talking, too restless to sleep, too lost to be anywhere else. But every second I stayed, every word we shared, felt like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape, like I was wading into water that was too deep, too dark, and I didn't know how to swim. She started talking again, about little things at first, safe things, the garden she'd been trying to keep alive, how the roses kept wilting no matter what she did, how she'd read half a book but couldn't remember the last page because her mind was always somewhere else. Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, like she was carrying something heavy and trying not to let it show. Then it shifted, like a tide turning, slow but unstoppable. She told me about the early days with Jake's dad, how they'd met in college, how he'd been charming and ambitious, promising her a life full of color and possibility. She talked about their first apartment, a tiny place with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, how they'd laughed about it, how they'd felt like they could take on the world. Her voice got quieter, sadder, as she described how things changed, how he started staying late at work, then taking trips that lasted weeks, then barely coming home at all. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm still here," she said, her fingers twisting the towel, her eyes drifting to the window, where the moonlight painted the glass. "Like really here. You know? Like I'm just a ghost in my own life." I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand, even though her words hit me somewhere I didn't have a name for. I wanted to understand. God, I wanted to know what made her sound so broken, what made her look at me like I could be the one to see her, to pull her back to herself. I asked her why she stayed, the questions slipping out before I could stop it, too raw, too personal, like I was reaching into a place I had no right to go. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and said, "For Jake. And because it's easier than leaving." There was something in her voice, resignation maybe, but also a spark of something else, something alive and restless, like a fire that hadn't gone out. Defiance. Longing. I don't know. But it made my chest tight, like her pain was seeping into me, like I was carrying it too. I told her she deserved better, the words spilling out, reckless and raw, like I was saying more than I should, like I was stepping over a line I couldn't see. She laughed, sharp and bitter, the sound cutting through the quiet. "Better," she repeated, like it was a word she'd forgotten, like it was a language she no longer spoke. "What's that even mean anymore?" She moved then, stepping closer to the table, close enough that I could smell her perfume, lavender, soft but overwhelming, like it was wrapping around me, pulling me in. Her robe slipped, just enough to show the curve of her collarbone, the pale skin glowing in the moonlight, and I looked away, my face burning, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape. She didn't fix it. She just stood there, one hand on the back of a chair, her fingers brushing the wood, watching me like she was waiting for something, like she was testing me to see how far I'd go. "You're sweet," she said, and it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a challenge, like she was daring me to prove her wrong. I mumbled something about needing to get back to bed, my voice shaky, but my body didn't move. My hands stayed on the table, my glass of water forgotten, my heart hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it, sure it would give me away. She sat down again, closer this time, her knee brushing mine under the table, the contact so light it was barely there, but it hit me like a shock, like a current running through me. I froze, waiting for her to move, to laugh it off, to make it normal again. But she didn't. She just looked at me, her eyes steady, unyielding, and said, "You don't have to be nervous." Nervous. That word couldn't hold what I was feeling. Guilt, want, fear, all knotted together in a tangle I couldn't unravel. I laughed, trying to play it cool, trying to pretend I wasn't drowning in this moment, but it came out shaky, weak. "I'm not nervous," I lied, my voice barely holding together. Her smile was real this time, warm and soft, and it made my stomach flip, made my head spin, made me want things I had no right to want. We talked more, about nothing, about everything, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting for this moment. She told me about a trip she'd taken alone years ago, before Jake was born, standing on a beach at sunrise, the waves crashing at her feet, feeling free for the first time in forever. She described the salt in the air, the way the light painted the water gold, the way she'd felt like she could breathe again. I told her about almost dropping out of college, how I'd driven to the edge of town one night and sat in my car, staring at the stars, wondering if I'd ever be enough, if I'd ever find my place. It was too easy to tell her things, too easy to let her in. She listened like my words mattered, like I was someone worth hearing, and every time she leaned forward, every time her hand brushed the table near mine, I felt that pull, stronger, harder, wronger. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't exist anymore. The kitchen was still dark, the moonlight still cutting through the blinds, but the world felt smaller, tighter, like it was just us, like nothing else mattered. She asked if I'd ever been in love, her voice soft but piercing, like she was reaching for something inside me. I fumbled, muttering about some high school girl who didn't matter, but it felt like a lie, because right then, in that moment, I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I was thinking about her, her voice, her eyes, the way she looked at me like I was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. I knew I was crossing lines, lines I couldn't uncross. I knew Jake was upstairs, sleeping, trusting me. I knew she was his mom, that this was wrong on every level. But knowing didn't stop me from wanting. It didn't stop me from staying. It didn't stop me from letting this moment stretch, letting it pull me under. I don't know when it happened, but at some point, I stopped fighting it. I stopped pretending this was just a talk, just two people passing time in the dark. Claire reached across the table, her hand covering mine, and it wasn't an accident this time. Her fingers were warm, steady, holding me there like a magnet, like a force I couldn't resist. "You're a good man," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, so soft it felt like a confession. But it wasn't true. A good man would have pulled away, stood up, gone upstairs, locked this moment away and forgotten it. I wasn't a good man. I was just a guy, sitting in a kitchen at 3 a.m., letting myself fall into something I knew was wrong, something that could break everything. The silence was louder than words, heavier than anything we could have said. Her hand stayed on mine, and I let it. I let myself feel it, the warmth, the weight, the pull that was stronger than my will to walk away. I let myself sink into the way her fingers curled slightly, the way her thumb brushed against my skin, soft but deliberate, like she was claiming something. And then I heard it, a floorboard creaked upstairs, sharp and sudden, like a crack in the world. Jake. My heart stopped, my hand jerking back like I'd been burned, the heat of her touch replaced by a cold rush of fear. Claire's eyes flickered, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. She just looked at me, calm, steady, like she'd known this moment was coming, like she'd been waiting for it. "You should go," she said, her voice soft but final, like she was closing a door we'd both opened. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, my head spinning with guilt and want and everything in between. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, the sound loud and harsh in the quiet, like an accusation. I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding, my legs unsteady, my mind a mess of what-ifs and should-haves. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last, and slipped into the guest room, closing the door behind me like it could shut out what had happened. I never told Jake. I never told anyone. That night changed me, though. It made me question who I was, what I was capable of, what lines I'd cross when no one was watching. Claire was the same after that, kind, warm, Jake's mom, making breakfast, asking about our plans, like nothing had happened. But sometimes, I'd catch her eyes across the room, that same spark, that same secret, and I'd wonder if she carried it too, the weight of what we didn't say, what we didn't do, what we almost let ourselves become. Have you ever had a moment like that? One you can't take back, can't forget, no matter how hard you try? One that lives in the quiet corners of your mind, whispering to you in the dark? Share it in the comments below, if you're brave enough. Would you have stayed in that kitchen, let the moment pull you under, or would you have walked away? Tell me what you'd do. And if this story hit you, if it stirred something deep, share it with someone who'd understand, someone who's felt that same pull.